She paid the rent while he played games and ignored the lease notice she put right in front of him. When renewal day passed, Emma confirmed the apartment under her name alone and let management update the locks. So when Ryan came home that night, his key didn't fail. It had expired, and there was no way back in. Emma used to start her mornings with the sound of his controller clicking. It was like a clock, not the kind that tells time, but the kind that reminds you how much of it is gone. Ryan said he was recharging, planning, figuring things out. Words. Always words. The apartment was full of them and empty of everything else. She didn't fight anymore. Not about the dishes, not about the bills, not even about the rent that kept pulling from her account each month. She worked from the small table near the window, headphones in, pretending not to hear the laughter from whatever game he was streaming. Sometimes he'd ask if she wanted to watch something together. She'd say she was tired, and she was. Just not the kind he could fix. The place smelled like takeout and stale coffee. Receipts stacked under his mouse pad. The fridge hummed, a list of business ideas curling on its door. He called himself a freelancer, but the only deadlines were hers. One night, while he argued with someone online, she muted her laptop and just listened. His voice was loud, alive, louder than she'd heard it in months. She realized she couldn't remember the last time he'd spoken to her with that much energy. The thought landed quietly, not sharp, just heavy. The next morning, she looked at the lease notice lying unopened on the counter. Bright envelope, due date in bold letters. She placed it next to his keyboard, right where he couldn't miss it. He didn't open it. He just moved it aside to plug in his headset. That was the moment it shifted. Not out of anger, not even sadness, just a silent understanding. She didn't have to remind him anymore. The clock had already started. Steam hissed from her coffee mug as she sat back down. It was the only sound that made sense. The envelope stayed on the counter for days, its corner curling from the heat of the stove. Ryan kept saying he'd get to it. He always said that, about the dishes, the job hunt, his big idea that just needed a website. Emma stopped answering. She let the silence do the talking. Every morning, she made coffee, typed through meetings, and watched him scroll on his phone like it was work. He'd sigh, complain about the economy, about corporate people who didn't understand creativity. She'd nod, eyes still on her screen. The more she said nothing, the more he talked. It was like he needed the sound of his own excuses to fill the air she'd emptied. At night, the apartment lights glowed unevenly, her side bright from the monitor, his side dim and blue from the TV. The contrast said everything. One afternoon, while he was out meeting a guy about a project, Emma logged into the property portal to check the lease. The renewal deadline was the next day. Her name was listed first. His was still under temporary occupant. She stared at it for a long second. The room felt heavier, like the silence had moved closer. Not planning, not thinking, just realizing how quiet the next version of her life could be. That night, he came home with a six-pack and an idea that was really going to change things. He talked for 20 minutes straight. She watched his reflection in the microwave door, nodding at the right times, waiting for him to stop. He didn't notice she'd already stopped listening. When he finally paused, she said, "You should get some sleep. You've got a big day tomorrow." He smiled, proud. "Yeah, it's all turning around." She smiled too, but hers was different. Later, after he fell asleep on the couch, she picked up the envelope and slid it into a drawer. The kitchen was still. The hum of the fridge was the only thing alive. She didn't know it yet, but the moment she closed that drawer, the decision was made. The clock had run out, quietly, just the way she wanted it. The renewal date passed without a word. Management sent a polite reminder to her email. "Thank you for confirming occupancy under your name." Just hers. No Ryan. No temporary occupant. She didn't reply, didn't smile, didn't even breathe for a second. Just clicked OK and went back to work. That night, he mentioned he couldn't get into the tenant portal. "Some glitch," he said, halfway laughing. She shrugged. "Yeah, systems do that." He didn't notice she didn't look up. Days stretched. The bills came in only her name now. The electric company, internet, rent, all addressed to Emma Lewis. She started saving the receipts, neat and folded, in a folder labeled Transition. Ryan kept talking about plans, crypto consulting, content partnerships, building a brand. She'd heard them all before. But now, his words didn't land anywhere. They just floated until the air swallowed them. On a Tuesday afternoon, The property manager knocked while Ryan was out. New key cards, the woman said, smiling, handing Emma 2 sealed envelopes. Just for you. Emma nodded, thanked her, and set them on the table. For a while, she just looked at them. The apartment was so quiet, she could hear the faint buzz from the fridge and her own heartbeat under it. That was the sound of control returning, small, steady, practical. When Ryan came home that evening, she was finishing dinner. He talked about an app idea, pacing, full of energy he hadn't earned. She listened like someone listening to rain, aware of it, but far away. He never noticed the old key card still hanging on his keychain or the new ones on the table. Later that night, after he'd gone to bed, she picked up the new card, slid one into her wallet, and placed the other by the door. She didn't plan revenge. She just planned order. The next morning, sunlight hit the boxes under the counter, ones she'd saved from deliveries, folded flat. She stood there a long time, hands on the edge of the sink, steam rising from her mug. Then she pulled the first box from the stack. The boxes lined the living room like quiet decisions. She started with his desk, a collection of cables, empty coffee cups, and notebooks full of half-finished ideas. Every label read like a promise he'd never kept. Prototype, launch plan, next step. She packed them one by one, not in anger, but in rhythm. Outside, a neighbor's dog barked. Inside, the only sound was cardboard folding. She worked slowly, the same way she used to help him organize his things when he first moved in. The difference now was the silence. No laughter, no plans, no I'll get to it. She found his hoodie draped over the chair, the one he wore every day when working. She folded it neatly and placed it on top of the pile. For a moment, she stared at it, a small pause, almost like guilt. Then she sealed the box with tape. By the time Ryan came home, the apartment looked cleaner than it had in months. The dishes were done, the counters clear, the air lighter. He didn't notice the boxes stacked by the door. He threw his keys on the table and grabbed a beer. So, he said, I think I finally figured out the concept. This one's real. She nodded. Good. You'll see, he said, grinning. Once this takes off, things are going to change. She smiled, a quiet, tired smile, and glanced at the clock. It was past midnight. He didn't notice her slip the new key card from her wallet, testing its metallic edge between her fingers. When he fell asleep on the couch, she turned off the lights, one by one. The room dimmed to a soft hum. She placed his old card on top of the boxes and stood there for a moment. It wasn't revenge. It was alignment, the world falling back into its right shape. The next morning, she left early for work. The door clicked behind her, a sound she'd never noticed before. By evening, the lock system had been updated. When Ryan came home, his card blinked red. Once, twice, then silence. He tried the key again. The light stayed red. For a second, he laughed, the kind of laugh people make when they think things can't be serious. He knocked, then harder, calling her name. Inside, nothing moved. Emma was in the kitchen, boiling water for tea. The kettle started its slow, rising whistle, that thin sound that grows until it fills every corner. She didn't rush to stop it. Her phone buzzed on the counter, Ryan calling. She let it ring twice before answering. What the hell, Emma? My key's not working. You said you'd take care of it, she said softly. Yeah, I was going to. It expired. He paused. The hallway behind him was quiet, his breath loud in the phone speaker. You can't just. I didn't, she said. The least did. There was no anger in her voice, just the calm of someone done repeating herself. She heard him exhale, mutter something under his breath, frustration mixed with disbelief. You could have told me, he said. I did, she replied. You just weren't listening. For a long second, neither spoke. The kettle reached its peak, a steady, almost peaceful scream. She turned off the stove. Your stuff's by the door, she said. It's all there. He didn't answer. The line clicked dead. She set the phone down, the counter cool under her palm. Then she stood there, mug in hand, the steam brushing her face. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean. She sat at the small table, the same one covered with his notes weeks ago, and looked toward the window. The city outside buzzed. Cars, voices, the faint hum of someone else's TV. Life kept going. Her tea cooled slowly. She didn't cry, didn't smile either. Just breathed, the kind of breath that belongs to someone who finally stopped waiting for change and made it happen quietly. When she finished, she washed the mug, placed it upside down to dry, and pulled the blinds halfway. Outside, footsteps faded down the hall. Inside, the air stayed still. The whistle of the kettle echoed once more in her memory, this time softer, like release.